On this primetime news, 5 more confirmed MERS cases in Korea. President Park Geunhye holds an emergency meeting and urges officials to do their very best to prevent further spread of that virus. South Korea successfully test fires a ballistic missile that can reach all parts of North Korea, the latest upgrade in its defense against Pyongyang's growing military threats. Meanwhile, the OECD slashes Korea's growth outlook for this year to 3%, fueling concerns of slow growth in Asia's 4th largest economy. Stay tuned for these stories and much more.
Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, June 3rd. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
We start with the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak in Korea.
For details, let's go straight to our Kim Ji-yeon, who is standing by at the news center. Ji-yeon?
Well, guys, we're at a total of 30 MERS cases with 5 new patients confirmed today. That's including secondary and tertiary patients. Currently, more than 1,300 people are quarantined in their homes or in state-run facilities to prevent the disease from spreading. As another preventive measure, 585 Korean schools have decided to temporarily close for this week. And for the time being, the military has announced that any soldiers who are suspected of contracting the disease may delay their mandatory service.
And what details do you have on President Park Geunhye's emergency meeting with ministers and doctors? Well, the government announced the establishment of a task force comprised of health authorities and local experts. He'll serve as a control tower to deal with the MERS outbreak and will be in charge of coming up with containment measures and the sharing of critical information among ministries. It's also responsible for strengthening care for confirmed patients. And at the meeting, President Park Geunhye called for better information.
그 환자의 치료와 또 그 처리 과정 및 감염 경로, 그다음에 치료 의사들의 그 어떤 이동 방향 이런 것에 대해서 좀 그 논의를 해야 되겠고, 또 그 이후에 그 접촉 환자의 그 진료 기관 또 진료 의사 등 그 환자들의 그 이동 경로가 어떻게 됐는가 하는 것을 이제 파악해 볼 필요가 있겠습니다.
In response to this, the task force announced that it would first designate a number of regional medical facilities that will be responsible for the care of MERS patients in that area. The group also vowed to share useful and accurate information to reduce public fear about the outbreak. And looking ahead, the task force said it would increase the number of infectious disease experts in order to increase the country's ability to deal with similar cases in the future.
Well, task force, emergency meetings, it's all good, but why is the government not announcing the names of the hospitals that are treating confirmed patients yet, Ji-yeon?
Well, when asked that question, the task force said it has decided to withhold that information because it would do more harm than good. They're concerned that people who suspect they might have the virus might delay treatment out of fear of going to one of these hospitals in question. And the task force reassured the public that the hospitals are now fully aware of the MERS outbreak and have taken necessary measures, including cordoning off special containment wards. And although there are 30 confirmed cases and the numbers in quarantine are growing, the task force believes the virus can be contained with the measures they are putting into place. Back to you guys.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ji-yeon. That was our Kim Ji-yeon reporting on the details of Korea's response to the MERS virus. While containing MERS is obviously the country's biggest task at the moment, the effect of the virus could spread beyond the health of its people.
And concerns are growing that the disease could infect the Korean economy. For this report, we turn to our Kwon So-ah.
After the biggest on-year export drop in almost 6 years, a 2-month fall in industrial production, and continuing weak consumer prices, the Korean economy is not in good health. Now, the possible financial fallout from a growing MERS outbreak has many experts worried. When severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, hit China in 2003, it dragged down the country's first quarter economic growth from 10.3% to 7.9%. In Hong Kong, it plunged from over 4% to almost minus 1% in the same period. Here in Korea, the tourism industry is already hurting, even though there aren't any official travel restrictions in place. According to the Korea Tourism Organization, 2,500 tourists from China and Taiwan canceled their trips to Korea as of June 1st. And this could just be the beginning.
The spread of the MERS virus is expected to have quite an impact on consumer sentiment. That's why it's time to consider additional measures, such as an expansion of the financial budget or a cut in the key interest rate.
Experts say the finance ministry may include these measures in policy directions for the second half of the year, which they will announce at the end of the month. Vice Finance Minister Chu Hyung-hwan said on Monday it's too early to consider that yet, but the ministry and other institutions are closely monitoring the virus effect on the economy. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And although it's still too early to tell how much the viral disease will impact the domestic economy, already sluggish conditions are leading to a downgraded growth forecast from a major economic institution.
The OECD slashed the country's growth outlook for this year to 3% from its previous forecast of 3.8%. The organization attributed the cut to the country's growing household debt and slow wage growth, both of which are denting consumer spending. It also cited the strong Korean won trend and slowing exports to China. The OECD also expects the global economy to lose steam, growing 3.1% this year, down 0.6 percentage points from its earlier forecast. It also estimated that the U.S. and China, the world's two largest economies, will show slower growth than earlier projections, while Japan is showing a small drop of 0.1 percentage points from 0.8%.
A revised law that allows lawmakers to demand changes to presidential orders continues to create divisions within the ruling party. Some party members are siding with President Park's office, concerned that the law encroaches on the executive branch's power, while the party chairman is trying to maintain the mediator role. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
At a meeting of its Supreme Council on Wednesday, Saenuri Party Chairman Kim Moo-sung urged party members to avoid a collision with the presidential office over the revised law and assured them there will be further discussion on the law.
The Saenuri Party should avoid confusion with the government and presidential office. Revisions to the law were first proposed by the opposition party, and discussions on the law will continue.
Some Supreme Council members say the revised law violates the constitutional division of powers.
Articles 75 and 95 of the Constitution give the executive branch the right to review legislation, and the Parliament doesn't have the right to interfere with that. That's why this revised law is unconstitutional.
This revised parliamentary law could paralyze state affairs. If the opposition continues to disregard the unconstitutionality of this law, then both parties will be held responsible.
The revised law, which passed last week, gives the National Assembly the power to demand changes to government enforcement ordinances. Critics say this gives the Assembly too much say over government policy, which goes against the constitutional separation of powers. Meanwhile, the presidential office, which objects to the revised law, lashed out at the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy over the revision. A presidential official said Wednesday that the party's floor leader Lee Jong-geol had disparaged the president the previous day, when he said President Park doesn't need to make a fuss over the revised law. He responded on Wednesday that he had no intention of insulting the president and urged the government to instead focus on dealing with the MERS crisis. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
On to the subject of national defense. For the first time in 30 years, today a South Korean president paid a visit to the state-run Agency for Defense Development. Researchers welcomed President Park Geunhye by showing her one of the country's most sophisticated weapons. Our Choi reports.
With President Park looking on, South Korea's state-run Defense Research Institute carried out the first test fire of a ballistic missile with a range of at least 500 kilometers. Part of Seoul's preemptive strike-kill chain system, the Hyunmoo-2B missile is capable of hitting targets almost anywhere in North Korea. In October of 2012, South Korea and the U.S. agreed to extend the South's ballistic missile range from 300 to 800 kilometers in the wake of rising nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. Officials in Seoul believe Pyongyang is close to miniaturizing a nuclear warhead and is developing an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the U.S. mainland. President Park stressed that national security comes from cutting-edge defense science and technology, urging researchers to ensure the safety of South Koreans through their hard work. She then called on the military to maintain a firm readiness posture. Along with the Hyunmoo-2B, the South Korean military has a 1,000-kilometer range cruise missile. Both are expected to successfully counter the North's threats on land and at sea. An 800-kilometer range ballistic missile in development is near completion. President Park also checked in on South Korea's air and missile defense system, observing a test launch of the Cheolmae-2 surface-to-air missile. It can strike ballistic missiles traveling above 15 kilometers in altitude. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Well, today is a historic day for both the South Korean and the U.S. Army. The two allies celebrate the launch of a new combined division. Our Na Young-kyung takes us to that ceremony held at Camp Red Cloud just north of Seoul.
This signaled the beginning of a new organizational paradigm. For the first time in South Korean and U.S. history, a combined division was formed to bolster combat readiness against Pyongyang. The commanding general of the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, which will lead the new combined unit, says today's event reflects much more than just a name change.
It serves as a signal to the world, and especially to our potential adversaries in particular, that we have made the transformation that is necessary to succeed on the battlefield.
The division will consist of a brigade from the South Korean Army and the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, which is currently located in Uijeongbu, north of Seoul. The ceremony comes after the two allies agreed last year to form this unprecedented division. Dozens of South Korean officers were dispatched to the Joint Staff Office earlier in January for an integration training session to ensure a smooth transition. Members of the Korean Brigade will carry out their regular duties under the Korean chain of command in peacetime, but will work with the U.S. troops in times of war. The division will be led by the American commander, while his deputy will be from the Korean Army. Although the two countries have worked in a similar manner under the Katyusha program or the Korean augmentation to the U.S. Army, officials say this is different in that the new division will have commissioned and non-commissioned officers from the South Korean Army under the command of the U.S. 8th Army.
I firmly believe that the ROK and U.S. combined division will be a linchpin in maintaining peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula by deterring North Korea's provocations and firmly responding should they provoke.
The new unit, whose mission includes eliminating weapons of mass destruction in North Korea, will stay in Uijeongbu for now, but will eventually be relocated to Pyeongtaek by the end of next year in accordance with the U.S.-based relocation plan. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
And on to the latest in the inter-Korean wage row. The South Korean government has warned more than a dozen firms operating at the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex that violated its directive to disregard North Korea's unilateral wage hike. The Unification Ministry said Wednesday that it issued the warning to 18 businesses that paid the increased March wages to the North Korean workers and added 31 firms are also under review for similar infractions. The ministry had made clear the companies will be punished if they comply with North Korea's unilateral move. A South Korean official said Seoul plans to propose talks with Pyongyang in the coming days to try to solve the wage tussle.
We're nearly halfway through the year, and a number of remarkable changes have been happening to the global economy. For an in-depth analysis of the hottest issues facing the Korean and world economies, our Shin Se-min spoke with senior World Bank official Axel van Trotzenberg.
How has China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or the AIIB, affected already existing financial institutions like the World Bank?
Well, as you know, that over the last couple of decades, there are always new multilateral organizations being created. We have been always supported of the creation of new institutions because they try to fill a certain gap, and in this case, an infrastructure gap. And we are helping the Asian Infrastructure Bank in many aspects. We see this much more in the overall context of that we need to do a lot more on infrastructure collectively, whether that is through a bilateral channel, a private sector channel, or a multilateral channel. These channels have proven not to be sufficient. So anything that adds and can help solve a part of the problem should be welcome.
And a lot of economists in Korea have forecasted that the country's economic outlook looks dim, stuck between a slowing China and a recovering Japan. We're halfway through the year now. How do you see Korea's economy, and what should policymakers do to better the situation?
Well, it's clearly that the whole world economy is still struggling with the growth challenge, if you wish. But yes, in China's economy has been softening. Also, world economic growth is still not strong. We see this actually always as an additional reminder to all countries that the structural agenda remains essential to improve competitiveness and see how one can best deal with major structural challenges. There are always structural challenges that are difficult, but that they can help resolve some of the growth problems in the individual countries.
The global oil prices has been on a downward streak for some time now, and from what I understand, the lower oil prices should be linked to higher growth, but we haven't been able to see that in a global economy. What are we missing here?
Well, I think this is one aspect. Clearly, what you are seeing is it has had an effect on the price. You see, there is that inflation has been fallen. Also partly as a result of the oil price. This is not something that is new. We have seen that in also past episodes. And certainly in a world economy that is fraught by some uncertainty, people are a bit more conservative. So that's the reason you don't see this immediate spike and growth boost. It's very clear because it reduces of course, the petroleum import bill. It has had a moderating effect on inflation, and of course, it helps firms to improve its competitive position.
Thank you for your time today, Vice President.
You're welcome.
And for the top international headlines, we now connect to our Polly at the News Center.
Our focus today, the head of the World Football resigns. China continues to search for survivors on the Yangtze River, and NASA marks a new milestone in space.
But Paul, let's get right down to it. Sepp Blatter has offered to step down as FIFA's president. What's the reaction from the world of football and other industries dependent on it?
Well, the head of the European Football Association, Michel Platini, called it the right decision, while her British counterpart said it was great news. Major FIFA sponsors such as Coca-Cola and McDonald's have also welcomed the move. But shortly after the announcement, media outlets in the U.S. reported that federal agencies are investigating Blatter himself as FIFA faces a widening corruption and bribery scandal. Our Son Jung-in reports.
In a stunning turn of events, Sepp Blatter announced his intent to resign at a news conference in Zurich on Tuesday. Speaking just 4 days after being re-elected for a fifth term in football's top job, the under-fire 79-year-old said the reforms he had tried to implement over the years had not been enough.
FIFA needs a profound overhaul. While I have a mandate from the membership of FIFA, I do not feel that I have a mandate from the entire world of football, including the fans, the players, and the clubs.
The announcement comes less than a week after U.S. federal agents arrested 9 FIFA officials and 5 marketing executives over allegations of corruption and accepting $150 million over the past 2 decades in bribes from World Cup host countries. It's not clear what triggered Blatter to suddenly call it a day so soon after winning 4 more years in office. But some sources have told U.S. media that Blatter may be implicated in the ongoing federal corruption probe after all. Blatter, who has been FIFA president since 1998, called for an extraordinary Congress to be held as soon as possible to elect a new president. FIFA officials say it will take at least 6 months to allow time for a proper election to replace him between December and March next year. Until then, Blatter is expected to continue to exercise his functions as FIFA president. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And following up on the FIFA crisis, Korean billionaire Chung Mong-jun says he is thinking of running for president of the Global Football Organization. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, the former lawmaker and Hyundai business tycoon said he would carefully consider taking out the top post after listening to the opinions of international football leaders. Chung had served as FIFA's vice president for 17 years and helped bring the World Cup to Korea for the first time in 2002. He was also instrumental in establishing the country's first professional soccer league. And shifting to the latest on the tragic boat sinking in southern China, authorities there have stepped up efforts to recover the more than 400 people believed to be still trapped inside the sunken vessel. On Wednesday, Beijing's transport ministry announced more than a dozen rescue ships were added to its fleet in the Yangtze River. Another 180 underwater divers have also joined the search, which has extended at several hundred kilometers downstream.
After overnight meetings and discussions amongst experts at the scene and our maritime search and salvaging experts from around the country, we agreed upon continuing to utilize divers searching for bodies and to rescue people trapped within the boat. Once all the relevant boats are ready, we will begin carrying out salvage operations.
State-run media says that 26 bodies have so far been pulled from the wreckage. Chinese weather officials say that a sudden tornado did form in waters where the Eastern Star capsized on Monday night. According to the maritime agency, the cruise boat had not been designed to travel amidst heavy winds, while records showed it had failed safety inspections 2 years ago. And finally, switching gears now to NASA, the U.S. Space Agency is marking a historic milestone. Astronaut Edward Higgins's wife became the first American to step into space on June 3, 1965. Now that's 50 years ago. Speaking from NASA's Space Center in Houston, veteran astronaut Michael Foreman described it as an amazing feat of human engineering.
It's just an amazing adventure out there in that one-person spacesuit. You know, looking outside of the space vehicles from inside through those flat windows is really cool, but going outside when you have that full panoramic view through your helmet is just amazing. To look down between your feet and see the Earth passing, 250 miles below you, it's just breathtaking.
Foreman, who joined NASA in 1998, has logged more than 600 hours in space. As for the next century, he said efforts are focused on developing the next generation of spacesuits, which will be used for a future manned mission to Mars. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
It was was a sizzling hot day today, and temperatures continue to remain way above average. And tomorrow will be even warmer here in the capital, with high peaking at 30 tomorrow afternoon. And the day will kick off with lots of sunshine, but a few clouds will move in later in the afternoon. And UV levels will also be very high across the nation, so be sure to wear sunscreen and stay inside or in the shade while the sun is at its strongest, which is between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. On that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. The day will start out in the mid to upper teens across the nation, but highs will soar to 30 in the capital, while Daegu and Gwangju rise to 31, but Busan will be slightly breezier, topping out at 26 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon will hit 30, while Jeju Island and Dokdo reach 25 and 24 respectively. Now we could get a little relief from the heat on Friday, as rain may fall in the southern coastal regions, but it's mostly sunny skies ahead for the upper provinces for the time being. Well, that's all for the weather. Have a wonderful evening.
You can complain that roses have thorns, or find rejoicing that the thorn has roses. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Please join us at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.